Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our very first webinar. I'm so excited to spend the next hour together discussing some ideas and recommendations that you can take back with you to your schools to help optimize your recruitment and staffing plans. My name is Jab Martinez, and I'm the Division Vice President for Amergis Educational Staffing. I'm joined today by Allison Hurtado, Vice President of Sunburst Workforce Advisors, and Kathy Lally-Lever, the Special Education Director at Bellevue School District in Washington. Amergis Educational Staffing has been a leader in the K-12 industry for over 20 years. We provide a wide range of classified and certificated staff, from everything from paraprofessionals to special education teachers and all the related service positions in between. Amergis is a nationwide educational staffing company. We partner with public school districts, educational service agencies, charter schools, private parochials, non-public schools as well. And so before we dive into today's exciting content, I want to take a little bit of time to learn more about today's speakers, starting with Allison Hurtado.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jad, and thank you to everybody joining today. So excited for this next, hour with you. I have been in educational staffing for the last 15 years, and two of which have been in workforce solutions at Sunburst, really helping school districts solution drive and kind of evolve with their staffing and staff management. And I'm super excited to introduce the next speaker, someone who I've been so lucky to have been working with the last couple years, Kathy.
Hi, my name is Kathy Lally-Lever. I am currently the Special Education Director in the Bellevue School District. Bellevue's a little bit, I guess, right outside of Seattle, Washington. I've been in public education about 20 years and very much enjoying where I'm at right now.
Great. So a little housekeeping or webinar housekeeping before we kick off today's chat here. If you're in the webinar, the chat's going to be disabled, but we will have a Q&A session at the end. So if you have any questions, please click on the Q&A button and leave your questions in that box. And also, please don't forget to click on the resources button, and you can find a free downloadable copy. It's of our strategic staffing partner guide, which is going to be a compilation of a lot of the topics and ideas and recommendations that we talk about today. And we are going to be speaking a lot about the various recruiting and staffing challenges that districts are facing, and more importantly, some of the innovative approaches that school leaders have used to address these challenges and really fill their staff vacancies. For those of you joining in districts where you've got recruiting and staffing challenges, you are definitely not alone. These past several years have been some of the most challenging in regards to the volume of vacancies districts nationwide have faced. With COVID now fully behind us, the education industry is now facing a new set of headwinds that's further impacting its ability to recruit and retain high quality candidates. And this list that we have here is not all inclusive, but really some of the most important factors that are either currently or soon to be impacting your district recruiting and staffing efforts. Well, thankfully, COVID is behind us, but so is the nearly $180 billion in federal ESSER funds that were allocated to districts. Now, many of those districts were using these funds for non-recurring costs like upgrading their HVAC systems or dilapidated buildings, but others spent those dollars on recurring costs like personnel. And now that these funds are no longer available, many districts are scrambling to balance their budgets, some of which are having to turn to extreme measures like furloughs and even layoffs, and increasing student populations on IEPs. Now, students in special education tend to have a significantly higher cost than those in general education, sometimes as much as triple the cost. Now, with the national average of students on IEPs now eclipsing 15%, up from 13 before COVID, we should expect those costs to continually increase for these departments and subsequently those districts. Declining enrollment in public school districts. Now, due to factors such as lower birth rates and also competing educational options like a rise in charter schools and homeschooling enrollment, we're expecting nearly 3 million students less in K-12 over the next 6 years. And knowing that a district budget is directly correlated with its student enrollment, we should expect to see decreasing budgets in many of these districts, particularly urban areas. And regardless of your political affiliation, I don't think anyone would argue that stability would be the likely term that you would be using when describing this administration's stance on education. And many unknowns still exist regarding the future of the Department of Education and certain title funding. And all those factors really lead to uncertainty in recruitment and hiring plans. So today is not going to be all doom and gloom. We're really excited to transition into really some of the more innovative approaches that some district leaders have used to really tackle their district staffing challenges. So kicking things off, Kathy, you've had a storied career here in education. Can you talk a little bit about your background in the K-12 space and particularly what drew you into special education?
Yeah, so like I said before, I've been in special education for 4 years, but my career spanned over 20 years. I taught for the first 10, as many of us do, and then I was a building leader for about 6. And then in the last 4 or 5 years, I've been in the central office. I've been the department head of early learning and the department head, obviously, in special education. So I've got quite a few different experiences. I think what led me to special education, that's an interesting question because I didn't start there. It's definitely been a journey. When I taught in a smaller district early on in my career, I always partnered with the special education department and the teachers in the school. So I don't know, I guess kind of by today's terms, I was more of an inclusionary gen ed teacher. Kids were always in my classroom, in and out all day. I was working with different paraeducators, different case managers, working with families, trying to meet the needs of all the students that I could. And then as my administrative career kind of got started, I landed in an assistant principal position for about a year and a half and then was promoted to principal pretty quickly. And I think that that is where I probably got my love for special education and my learning, like that deep, complex learning. I was a principal of a school, over 600 students. I had 5 self-contained classrooms, low incidence, so students with life skills, real complex needs, many therapies, case managers, parent involvement. And that's where I think that that's where my love and I don't know, my need to help and support families and students with special education needs. And then during COVID, I was the director of early learning and family supports. And at that time during COVID, I was running, in our state, we had emergency childcare. Our governor mandated that we have ways for first responders to drop kids off. And we were all remote. So it was easy for the district to open up a school, have childcare, and do remote services. And I was working with preschool at the time as well. And we brought our preschoolers back first and our students with special education needs. And so it kind of always came up and it was always part of my life. And after COVID was over, there was a director of special education position open. And I interviewed and was placed in that position, which was awesome. And it's been a great growing experience since. So, and then I was just, I have kind of moved up as department head now, just in the last year. So, it's been interesting and fun and complex and, you stretch your brain, as I'm sure many of us know every day.
Right. Yeah. And, in special education, staffing challenges or recruitment challenges tend to be the norm, unfortunately. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with staffing challenges, maybe even pre and post COVID in the special education department there?
Sure. So previously, as a building leader, districts have different ways of doing things. In our district in Bellevue, departments are usually in charge of most of the hiring of their department staff. As a principal, I was really active because not only did I want my department staff at the school doing their job, but also feel like they're part of the culture and part of the building, having relationships. So I was really active with that. Pre-COVID, I would say that I mean, it was easier to hire qualified staff in special education, case managers or teachers. Usually, we had multiple applicants that we could choose from and offer positions to. School psychologist, SLP, OT, PT. I'm sure no one is, or everyone's probably agreeing with me on this one. I mean, it's always been a little challenging in the last few years, I think even pre-COVID to fill those positions with high quality candidates. But I think after COVID, it has just been exponentially more challenging. Again, case managers, yeah, qualified, experienced candidates. Sure, yes, we do have candidates. I would say where we really have sticking points and hard times are school psychologists, SLP, OT. Especially when those short-term coverages are needed. People go on maternity leave, medical leave. Someone moves in the middle of the year unexpectedly. That has been really challenging. The big question, especially with SLPs for us, has been, well, will you take someone remote? Our district has been really stringent on no, we want in-person services for our students. So that has been, it makes it a little bit more difficult. So, I mean, it's just gotten harder to find quality candidates that have experience. I think also kind of what's adding to it is, and I'm sure everyone can relate to this, is the needs and the complexity that are coming to school have grown just as exponentially as it is hard to find someone. So that combination has been really difficult for special education directors, I think, at least in my area for sure. We meet, once a quarter or so, trying to just exchange ideas and brainstorm and vent a little bit about frustrations. And, it's interesting because we share our staff around here. I mean, the neighboring districts like, oh, so-and-so is moving. And so that's been nice, kind of networking. But I mean, all in all, it's definitely been harder.
So that's a lot of challenges,
Yeah.
pre and post COVID. I know that's not your reality right now. Can you kind of talk us through how some of the recruitment roadblocks that you did experience when you're recruiting, but also some of the strategies you all took to mitigate, some of the challenges you just discussed?
Yeah. So let me think. Roadblocks. I would say, and I don't know how many people are on the call that or the webinar that can relate to this, but I know in my district, in my experience, we've always kind of done recruiting the same way. You post on your website, you get your applicants, you filter through your applicants and you review, you put an interview panel together, you invite people in, you interview, you hire. It's pretty standard. You ask the same questions, you give them the same tasks. I know HR does try to go to job fairs and kind of put our name out there. When we're hiring, we were just at a hiring fair a couple weeks ago. They invited me. I've gone the last couple of years, so I can kind of talk to people right then and there for those hard to fill positions if they're at the job fair. But we did put a sign up for us that we were specifically looking for those hard to fill jobs of SLP, school psychologists, OT, PT. But that's all we've done in the past. So we've had to really, we've ended up having to partner with several different agencies over the past few years, more so I think than we did pre-COVID, to get our hard to fill certificated positions filled. But really our paraeducator and our behavior aides, those positions have been very difficult to fill coming out of COVID. One, because we needed an excess of them. It's just hard to find them. And when you're recruiting, your recruiting reach is, here's the application on the website and here's the way we do things, it just makes it difficult to actively go out when that's not your main thing you're doing, because it can be very time consuming. So I think that that's really, I mean, that's the main roadblocks is, it's time. Time is of the essence, and there's a million things that special education directors are doing, and hiring and recruiting is only one small thing that makes a huge difference in the lives of our students and our families when you get the right people in the right places serving the students the way they need to be served.
Absolutely. Outside, how did you lean on those agencies? What sort of like innovative strategies did you all, I feel like you mentioned before to me that you used to have a huge Rolodex of
Yeah,
companies,
yeah,
how's that evolved?
we had just to meet the needs of everyone we needed. We I can't even think of the number. We had multiple partners that we were using to fill. I mean, I think we had 3 or 4 alone filling para educators around the area, school psychologists. That's a big one. And that's specifically, that one's in my brain because that's a group that I've supervised in the last few years. So yeah, there was a Rolodex, Allison, you were correct. And it just it was so much to manage. And that, I guess it was partnering also created more roadblocks, right? I mean, or not even roadblocks, but time consuming tasks to make sure that we had enough people to meet our offers of faith that were written in IEPs throughout the district. So, that was a roadblock too, communicating out to staff and the department, like what needs are coming in at such a rapid pace and the level of complexity, and what resources do we have, or do we need to go out and find to meet the complex needs that were coming back to us after COVID. I mean, having students remote learning for a good chunk of a school year, I mean, it brought back the levels of anxiety, and we're seeing a ton of mental health issues in our students. So what does that mean? Where are tier 2 interventions to help these students so they don't qualify for special education? There's just a lot of complexity and layers to the things that we're trying to support. And we're a medium to good sized district, 20,000 students, and it's just a lot to reach every student and meet the needs. And when it comes to the staffing, it's like we need people, and there's such an urgency. I think my colleagues would probably also understand this, like there's an urgency to fill a need when you've written it into an IEP. There's so many complications if that need isn't being met in the moment, that kind of has some aftermath. So I think that also, that sense of urgency, you're kind of like, oh my gosh, I got to get this done. And it turns into this 24/7 thing. And trying to find the people is just one part of your job. So.
Now, Kathy, managing a department budget, it's no easy task. And you mentioned, staffing and recruiting is just one portion of your job. Especially considering some of the factors we talked about earlier: budget uncertainty, increasing student population, kiddos and IEPs. Today was definitely not the doom and gloom call. We wanted to provide the webinar attendees, some innovative thoughts and recommendations on what you've done to implement at Bellevue, particularly to reduce some of your costs and free up time and resources within the special education department. Can you kind of expand a little bit on that, what you've done to be able to tackle some of those issues and really free up some time and resources?
Yeah, so a big cost out for our district is paraeducator support. So I'm going to talk specifically about that a little bit, and kind of just walk through the journey of how it all started when I came in and to kind of where we are now, and maybe even some of the things I'm thinking about next steps wise. So when I came in right after COVID, we had about 420 paraeducators that we needed the positions filled for. 300, I mean, these are rough numbers, about 300 of them were they were BSD hires, and then 120 on any given day were agency staffed paraeducators. And even then, I don't even think we got to 120. I think we were always down a handful of people, but we it was, that's a lot of people coming in to support schools and support the need and safety concerns. And, right out of COVID, there was a lot of, people were getting sick still. And there were mandates about how long you had to be out for. And so, these short-term absences added up. And so there was that's another kind of roadblock that we ran into early on. So, early on, it was a lot of agency, a lot of just kind of like, the analogy the director group used was whack-a-mole. It was like, okay, here's a problem, here's a Band-Aid, here's a problem, here's a Band-Aid, here's a problem, here's a Band-Aid. Here's a problem, have a glass of water. So I think after that year, we realized that we really needed to kind of get things under control, budgetarily, obviously, and, focus on what the needs actually were and come up with plans to be proactive. And I always say, when you're trying to implement something new, there's this piece of it where you're like, you've got all these things to tackle. You want to be proactive, but you also have to kind of keep going with what you're doing to grandfather in that proactivity. And so, you've got to figure out that short-term plan and long-term plan and implementations of both. So when we were looking at staffing specifically, we were looking at how to, meet the needs of the students, safety, of course, and then also how to budgetarily meet, what we needed to do to stay within budget. And every agency does things differently. So we were kind of working with different agencies on, okay, I'm working with this agency, I've got to think this way, and this is what we're spending on this. And then I look at this agency and the paperwork and documentation for this. Okay, I'm looking at this. And then talking to them, and then trying to figure out how to cover short-term, how to cover long-term. And these are all the things I'm thinking about with the budget sitting in my brain. And also realizing, coming out of year one as a special education director, not crying too much, that I spend all of my time on this one problem and other things are suffering for it. And I do sound kind of doom and gloom, but there's a happy ending. There's definitely a happy ending. I think year two, we finally started putting in monitoring and tracking systems where we could track and monitor better each agency, and honestly each BSD staff member too, because there was, who do we use when we need short-term, people are sick and out for the 5 days or the 10 days that it was originally, and we were sticking agencies into BSD places and BSD and agency vacancies. And so it was just this huge, all we cared about was safety and out at the schools. And everybody was navigating this, building principals were calling, teachers were calling. In Bellevue, we have a strong union presence and it's been a great relationship. They're calling, going, what's going on? What's going on? So we really had to, I think halfway through that second year out of COVID, it was like, all right, we need to get our ducks in a row. So myself and our budget analyst at the time, we kind of sat down and we looked at, each agency partnership, kind of what we were getting out of them, and not just out of them like, oh yeah, the monetary piece, but who shows up for us, who's sending us people that are, really valuable and are sustainable, and long term, are these the people that we want to partner with. We made the decision to go down to 2 agency partners at the time for the following year, and to kind of that they were more aligned. I would say, I think the biggest takeaway is we got organized finally, and we stopped with the Band-Aids and the whack-a-mole game, and we spent some time up front instead of just whack-a-moling all the time. We looked at our needs. We worked with our HR department to look at our staffing budget, our direct staffing budget, and then what we have as MSOCs, our materials, our materials budget basically and our operating cost budget. And we looked at what we needed to do there to make sure we were aligned and meeting the needs of the students. So I think in the end, that's where we really started seeing some organization and some like, we're spending our money in the right places. And then after that, we ended up narrowing it down even further. And, but I guess the key there was, and I guess we didn't narrow it down, we ended up, I guess, adopting or implementing an MSP at the time. Now I guess we're on year 2. And I think that honestly, that was the point where I felt like my money and my time was, I guess I could take back my time and do other things, but also not worry as much budgetarily because we found an MSP to help us partner in that way. So that was the tipping point. I think prior to that, I was interviewing 50 to 60 applicants for paraeducators. Any second I could in between schools, driving en route to things, I was talking to applicants and candidates. And then at that point in time, I think when we adopted the MSP, that was when I was like, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. I can just go visit a school and walk around and be with the principal and talk to the case managers that I'm working with, or I can go meet with the school psychologists and have time to do professional development with them. And oh my gosh, I just had more time. And then this last year, which was, I mean, just kind of the icing on the cake, really, we went to the MSP and we said, can we just, do a market analysis to see if we're still in the right range? We are negotiating with our union about their compensation. And the MSP ended up coming back and saying, actually, we're going to decrease your hourly rate by $1. And we were like, excuse me? Okay. I mean, no one's going to fight that, right? So I think that was when I was like, my office manager here, she was my office manager back when I was a principal. She looked at me, she goes, Kathy, we will never be without an MSP again. And everybody knows your office manager runs your life. So with that being said, she was just like, this has changed not only my life as far as my professional life working and what I'm spending my time on, but also my office staff. I mean, because it trickles down to them too. And they're, the MSP is a one-stop shop that has helped them do what they need to do for budget and finance. And so, I mean, all in all, I think that's, I mean, the kind of the journey to saving time and money. And I know, like I said, they decreased the hourly rate by $1, but adding that up times however many employees we're contracting them with, that number grows quickly. And I appreciate the relationship with the MSP that they want the same outcomes we do. So, yeah. Was that a long story for a short question?
No, that was perfect. It's the education industry has its own terms and acronyms. It needs its own definition sheet, I think. So Alice and I might be familiar with the term MSP, but maybe for yourself, you can expand on it just a little bit. Like, what's an MSP mean to you? Like, how does it kind of work? What did it work for you? And how did you use it to implement to save that time?
Okay, so I will say, I can tell you what an MSP is to me. I don't know all the terminology in the MSP world, but basically it's a system we implemented with our MSP partners, and we have a team of people that is dedicated to our district. And that team of people basically takes in all of our requests for certificated staff, whether that be a teacher, SLP, OT, PT, nurses, what have you, audiologists, anything we need, orientation, mobility, all those hard to fill positions. And paraeducators, and then they go out and they do what they do in the background. And then we have people show up to work. I mean, it's as easy as that. I would say, I mean, on my end as a special ed director, I'm able to fill the need because I have one place that I'm calling in a team of people that support our district. I would say my office manager, my staffing coordinator They would say they're a team of people that support us in our needs, but it's also one invoice. I'm not working with a million different agencies and different invoicing. It's one place to pull our data when we need to look at data as far as like who's working with which student. It's a one-stop shop for them. They're not going to the 3 different or 5 different or 20 different agencies and going, oh gosh, which agency am I working with right now? I've got to do it this way. Oh, now I'm going to this agency and I've got to think through it this way. We have one place to talk to and get our needs met, and then they go do all the other stuff for us. So that's what an MSP is to me.
Yeah, that's perfect. And before we finish up here, just a quick reminder for anyone on the webinar, if you have any questions, please click on the Q&A button and feel free to add in anything that you want any of us to tackle here at the tail end of the call here.
Thanks, Kathy. I mean, honestly, just love hearing the entire story from where you came from and, what sort of transpired, and you've gone through so many iterations of staffing, especially because of COVID, to like where you are today. And you've shared a lot of good stuff that I know that the school district did. I mean, the MSP could be, one lever of support that you all had, but there's just been so many things that Bellevue has done and implemented in the last couple of years that have really made you guys kind of this successful sort of like engine that you are right now for special education. And so you have a bunch of potential peers on the line today. If you were to give them a top 3 tips for how to sort of optimize their staffing right now and, for the 26, what are we, 26 school year, what would you say?
So, I mean, thinking back to when I was trying to manage the Google Forms and from one agency and the Excel spreadsheet with the other agency and whatever kind of system the other agencies had, and just like having to have my brain in so many places, I would say the first tip would be to get organized. Look at what your IP is calling for, the minutes. Try to really get that thoughtfully laid out. Then I would say, as far as the second thing I would do is for all the agencies everyone's working for to fill the positions, I would say ask questions of them and align yourselves with the ones that have the same values and want the same outcomes as your district. Not just every agency is going to, at least in my experience, want the same things maybe your district does for the kids. So I would definitely do that. Think about what your values are as a district and as a department. And then I would even ask your agency partners if they are working with an MSP already, and see what they say and ask questions about that, because really that was such a time saver and an easy way to look at how we can save money. And then go all in with whoever you choose. Don't hold back, go all in, lean on them. And I mean, if you picked right, that partner with that same alignment and values and outcomes, they will come through for you. And I would say, make sure to set up lines of communication when you're going all in, especially for those harder to fill positions. So tell them what you want, tell them what you need. Make them kind of just like that. I mean, that outreach that you want them to be. Like, we have calls, the cadence calls a couple of times a week, and they're short with my office staff, with our MSP team, and go lean on them, and they'll get to know your schools and they'll get to know the needs and they'll ask the right questions, and so will you. And I would say year 2, year 1 was great. Year 2 has been even better. So I guess get organized, align with your agency partners and ask about an MSP, and then also just go all in.
Love that.
So we are going to, and thank you, Kathy. This is some great tips and resources. We're going to transition into the Q&A session here. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them into the Q&A session there, and we will go ahead and start pulling these up, and we're gonna fire these off at you, Kathy, here from the hip. So,
All right.
all right, we got one coming in. Yeah, no, this is timely. So we are heading into Memorial Day weekend, so unofficial kickoff to the summer. Last few weeks of the school year for most districts out there. Question for you, Kathy, here. What should a district leader be thinking about and doing today to prepare for filling their upcoming school year staffing vacancies?
Okay, so shout out to those that are done, I think, this week, because there's a handful, probably more on the East Coast, that are getting to that ending point this week. And I know some of us on the West Coast probably have 4 or 5 weeks left, but we can do it. We can do it. I would say the biggest thing that I've been doing, this is such an interesting time of year because you're trying to, planning for next year kind of starts in January and February for central office, especially if you're on the, September to June track. We are looking at allocations, looking at IEPs, trying to figure out kind of total numbers and formulas. I think what's helped us in the last couple of years is really bridging that gap between our HR departments and our budget departments. In the past, at least in our district, we've kind of been siloed. And so, finding your friends in those departments, your leader friends that really want to be lockstep with you. And I mean, that makes everything smoother, I think, as far as going into next year and knowing the needs, knowing the, at least trying to know the needs. I mean, everything is fluid, and, August will come and September school will start. And you never know who's going to move in. You never know who's going to move out. I would also say something to think about, something I've actually was thinking about just this past weekend, is contingency plans and what you can think of as your plan A if everything lands exactly how you want it, which it never does, especially in our department of special education. And then having plan B and also having plan C. And making sure that your HR friends and your budget friends also know plan A, B, and C. So when go time comes and those kids show up, it looks like we had a plan all along, no matter what the plan ended up being. I think that would definitely be my advice kind of going into Memorial Day weekend. For those of you who are done, I mean, relaxing, and the next year will come. And for those that have Memorial Day weekend, enjoy the weekend. And we got 4 weeks after that. So yeah.
Awesome. I like this one because, Bellevue is a big school district, and I think we get this a lot. But Kathy, I work in a district with less than 5,000 students of enrollment size. What are your thoughts on an MSP for a smaller school district?
That's a good question. So here's what I think. I think if I'm a SPED director and I'm working and my time is consumed by working with multiple different agencies, no matter the size of your district, I think it's worth asking the question and looking into and considering an MSP. It's one thing, I guess, it's one thing that can be alleviated from your plate. If you pick the right MSP, which I feel like Bellevue has right now, it's one thing that you could take off your plate. And what SPED director doesn't want one thing off their plate? One to-do list box checked, that they have somebody trying to help and support them filling those hard positions. And some smaller districts are really, they need the support more than even the bigger districts, because there's less of an applicant pool maybe. So I think it's always worth consideration and asking. It's worth asking about for sure, and seeing if it's an MSP that would work and that would benefit.
Good point on the infrastructure difference.
So here's another question coming out from the group here. So Kathy, what recommendations do you have for districts that can better integrate agency staff into their district's culture? We run into this a lot from the staffing side of the house, we do our best to interview and vet and prepare our candidates for the personality and the culture of each of their districts. And then also we really rely on our district partners and school partners to do the same and integrate. And we found that the best partnerships have been when we have a little push and pull on districts, really working hard to integrate staff from agencies into their own culture. But can you kind of expand on that a little bit? What kind of recommendations do you have for integrating?
Yeah, actually, this is probably one of my favorite questions that I get asked, honestly, by even surrounding people. So early on, because of the whack-a-mole game we were playing, it was like, just throw them in, get somebody in there that's qualified and willing to do the job and understand safety and, kids. Just please get them in there. We'll give them in the IEP. We'll show them what they need to do, what have you. Constant turnover. I mean, with any of our partners, it was just constant. And then I think organically that in the last couple of years, it was like, why are we doing this to anybody? I wouldn't want that done to me, being thrown in and not know who I'm going to show up to, where the school is, like, what am I doing? So what we did, one of my staffing coordinators and we put together a PowerPoint presentation. And when we know we're going to have agency staff come in, let me back up. Going into the fall, when we start school, we have an orientation for the bigger, larger group because we've gotten organized enough that we know how many people we need, a little bit about where they'll be placed, kind of, loosely, unless something changes. We have a plan A and a plan B and a plan C. But they will come to about a 2-hour orientation at the beginning of the year, put on by myself or my staffing coordinator. And then throughout the year, every Monday, we do the same orientation. So we kind of hold it on our calendars just in case we have new people. September and October and November are busier than, say, now. We haven't had an orientation in a handful of weeks. But that same orientation goes over kind of the broader look at the district, the different schools, the different services we offer, where those are. And we go into what an IEP is, what a behavior intervention plan is. We go into roles and responsibilities. I go into, hey, when you get to your building, no matter what it is, here's the top 5 people you need to know. Here's how you call out. Here's how because they're working for a contract for the agency, so they need to call out there, but they also need to let their team in the buildings know what's going on too. So, all those kind of protocols. We go into a little bit about PBIS. We go into responsibilities, roles. I go even as far as I have a page that says, here's some questions to ask once you get to your school. Here's a question that you could ask the principal. Here's a couple of questions that you ask the case manager. Here's some information that I bet your case manager would want to know about you. And I do tell them, if they haven't seen some kind of IEP at a glance after week 1 of being there, they need to be encouraged to ask because they need to know what they're doing at the school working with the students. And that's for paraeducators. The same thing happens for certificated staff, someone from each of the little sub-departments. If it's a school psychologist, I'll match them up with a little mentor and then talk to their principal and match them up so that they can have kind of like this informal, formal orientation, if you will, for lack of a better term. So that's one way that we have, I would say we've reduced turnover in the last 2 years significantly with that. And the reason I do, and people are like, well, why don't you just give them school specific? One of the things that is convenient about using agency staff is that they can be moved and they can be moved quickly. If a student moves programs, if a student moves schools, I can, by nature of their position and working with an agency, I can move them and they follow the student. So I like to give people somewhat of a heads up of kind of the bigger scope of things. So when one student is, moves to another and I say, oh, you're going to go to Stevenson Elementary on Monday, they're like, okay, I kind of know where that is. I'm aware of it. I understand the services offered there. Let's see, a couple of other things I do. I have them work the same amount of hours as our BSD direct hires. I also require them to go to the 30-minute collaboration time that each of our BSD hires has in their contracts so that they are together with their teams and they can collaborate for 30 minutes once a week or with their special education teacher. I also do have them take the same trainings as our district directed hires do as well. So they become part of our team. I would say the other thing that we do that is pretty great. We have a temp to hire. So when they're hired, I have our MSP that we use has taken on all of my hiring practices that I would have if it was a direct hire. So questions are similar, all of those kinds of things are similar. So they're getting the same kind of experience, even though they're going through the MSP or the agency that my direct hires are going through the principals. So it's kind of like a, you know, I see no different when I see an agency para or a BSD direct para, because eventually I hope that I am training someone that's going to be a direct hire. And I will say also, you know, I've worked with the unions to see that as a positive. And we've got a great relationship with our union as far as, you know, that temp to hire, and they're excited because then they have new members eventually too. So we've done a lot of work in the last 2 years in that space of trying to gel the paras and gel our contracted staff. And yeah, I think that that's kind of the main things we've done. We've done a lot of work actually around that. So I'm pretty proud of what we've done there.
That's great.
That's great advice. We got 2 questions that are kind of aligned. So we can kind of go part 1 and part 2 on this. The first one is, how can we know if an MSP is aligned with what we want for our school? And if you want to like 2-prong this, the next one was, which questions should we be asking when we're trying to onboard, implement an MSP? So kind of aligned, I guess. What should a district be asking to kind of figure out, I guess, if an MSP is aligned with your internal goals and as a district?
Those are awesome questions. So I can give you examples. So in Bellevue, relationships matter. Part of our strategic plan is leading from the heart and having human-centered practices. And that's a big one for our superintendent, for all departments to be implementing. So when I'm talking to my agency partners, I wanted to know what was important to them for in a relationship. I wanted someone, you know, that has great communication, integrity, values children, and sees the children as important as we do, and the safety of those children. So, you know, maybe not all agency partners feel that way, or maybe they do, I don't know. But when in talking to them and forming relationships, you can kind of feel out and ask people, you know, what their values are and what they think is important. And you know, I will say, in all honesty, I mean, it took 2 or 3 years to kind of figure that out. But I think our strategic plan, the board and our superintendent really values that human-centered piece. And so we've really looked to partner with people that believe relationships matter and communication matters, and integrity matters. So I think that that's one thing. I would say, as far as what questions should we be asking when trying to onboard, go back to your strategic plan, go to your vision for your departments. What's important? What would you want? If you were hiring someone directly as a teacher or as a school psychologist, what would you want to hear from them as far as their EQ, their emotional intelligence? And those are the types of questions you're going to want to ask your MSP, because if they're doing outreaching to agencies and doing your hiring for you, those are the types of things you would ask them, almost kind of like an interview a little bit.
That's great, Kathy. You know, we got one final question, it looks like, here from the audience, and I'm sure no one is really dealing with this, being able to hire all their own candidates internally. That would be a good problem to have, I think. But it looks like the state of educational staffing is not incredibly ideal. So question, Kathy, for you, how do you determine when to utilize educational staffing company support, so from an agency, versus continuing to rely solely on your own internal recruiters and recruitment efforts?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is one that's evolved also. I would say again, before it was like any opening I had that I couldn't fill, agency, please do it. Now we've been more strategic, I think. And in that, I think I talked about being kind of proactive too. You know that plan A, plan B, plan C needs to happen. So what I would say as far as paraeducators, I use them knowing that there could be movement with students because it's harder to move. One of our BSD direct hires, there's, you know, contractual language around how and what and how long it takes. And sometimes that move, that urgency that I was talking about, needs to happen Monday and it's Wednesday the week before when an IEP team makes decisions. So I'm strategic about that. I'm strategic about mobility of the schools. I'm strategic about kindergarten and matriculation years. I am strategic knowing that there will be surprises at the beginning of the year, and maybe I need some float support for a little while until we land somewhere in mid-October and make decisions. I'm strategic in that way. As far as certificated staffing, I would say, I mean, honestly, I always try to hire directly. It's no secret, but I would say maternity leaves, medical leaves, those short-term leaves, our agencies have really helped us out there. So I will go to an agency at that point in time. And to be quite fair, you know, there's other factors that I think about, you know, where and where schools are. I look at data. Try to think what else. My director team helps support decisions when and where we need them, specialized support, especially those high needs students and situations. I will lean on agency partnerships with that as well.
That's great, Kathy. And thank you so much for your time calling in here from, it looks like, Bellevue School District here with a few weeks left here in the year. And happy Memorial Day weekend to you. And for everyone joining, again, just a quick reiteration, please click on that resources button and you can download that free copy of our strategic staffing partner guide. My information, Allison's information is on this slide deck as well. We'd love to connect with you, further discuss any questions that you have around staffing or MSPs or anything out there. So feel free to reach out. Don't be a stranger. Thank you so much all for joining our first webinar, and we look forward to connecting with you all soon. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the week.